Arizona Territory, summer of 1878. The sun was burning the canyon floor when Grace Halloway woke up alone, her lips cracked, her dress torn, and her hands scraped raw from the climb. Her husband had left her. She sat on a jut of redstone, knees pulled to her chest, staring out over the empty canyon. No trail, no boot prints, no wagon, no sign of the man she had married just 4 months ago in a Prescott church. He had taken the horses, the canteen, and the supplies while she slept. Grace swallowed hard, the heat pressing down on her like a weight. She had begged him not to leave the trail, but he had insisted they cut through the canyon, that it would be faster. He had grown angrier each day since they left town, blaming her for things she could not fix, accusing her of things she had never done. When she had told him she was with child 2 weeks ago, he had not said a word. He had just stared at her. And now he was gone. By midday, her lips bled. Her ankles throbbed from climbing the rocks, trying to find a better view, trying to believe maybe he had been taken or lost. But deep down she knew. He had chosen to leave her. She was 23, pregnant and alone in a place that would kill her before the next sunset. She pressed her hand to her belly. "I will not die here," she said aloud, though her voice was hoarse and dry. The sun dropped lower. She stumbled into a narrow cut between the canyon walls where shadows stretched cool and long. She fell, her knees hitting hard rock. She stayed there, eyes closed, whispering prayers that floated up with the dust, prayers for anything, mercy, a miracle, someone. That was when she heard it. A footstep. Quiet. Then another. Her eyes opened. A man stood at the mouth of the passage. He was tall, his shoulders broad and still. His skin was sun-darkened, his black hair tied back with a band of leather. The bone necklace across his bare chest moved with his breath. He looked at her without speaking, his eyes sharp and unreadable. Grace tried to stand, but her legs shook. She braced herself against the rock. "Please," she said, her voice barely there. "I need water." The man stepped forward slowly, crouched beside her, and reached into the leather pouch at his side. He held out a water skin. She drank. Too fast at first. He waited until she stopped coughing before he offered more. "Your man left you," he said, speaking English with a steady, low voice. She nodded, tears streaking down her sunburned cheeks. "I saw his tracks," he said. "He rode north." Her throat closed. "He left me to die." The man did not respond. He stood and looked out toward the canyon wall. "I am Etu Redbird," he said after a moment. "My people live beyond the mountains. Come." Grace blinked at him. "Why are you helping me?" He looked down at her, eyes dark and sure. "Because I heard you call. And because the spirits led me here." She did not understand what that meant, but she took his hand. He helped her stand, then guided her through the narrow pass. The way was slow. Her legs barely worked. He did not rush her. His presence was silent, steady. When she stumbled, he caught her. When she cried quietly, he said nothing but stayed close. By dusk, they reached a small grove tucked between the cliffs. A fire burned low beside a lean-to. She sank to the ground. Etu crouched beside her, checking the scrapes on her arms and legs. His hands were firm but gentle. "This place is safe," he said. "You will rest here tonight." She nodded, too tired to speak. He brought her food, a bit of dried meat, a handful of berries. She ate slowly, watching him from the corner of her eye. His movements were calm, deliberate. He did not ask questions. But he watched her too. Not like her husband had, with judgment or anger. Etu watched like he was trying to understand her. After the fire burned low, he stood. "I will sleep nearby," he said. "You are safe." She lay down on the blanket he had given her. Her last thought before sleep took her was of his voice, low, calm, certain. She had never felt safer. The next morning, she woke to birdsong and the smell of smoke. Etu sat by the fire, stirring something in a pot. "You should eat," he said without turning. She sat up slowly. "Thank you," she said. "You are not strong yet," he said. "But you will be. You have a spirit that does not break." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" He turned to her, then, eyes steady. "Because you are still here." They stayed at the grove for 2 days. Each day, Etu showed her how to crush roots for a healing paste, how to boil certain leaves for strength. He taught her to move with care, to save her breath. He never asked about her husband again. On the 3rd morning, she woke to find him beside her, crouched close, his hand lightly resting on her arm. "I dreamed of you," he said. She blinked. "What?" I saw you before I found you. I saw your face in firelight. I heard your voice in my dream. And when I found you, I knew. She swallowed. Knew what? He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a flake of dried skin. You are the mate of my soul. She stared at him, heart-thudding. You do not need to say anything, he said. I will take you to my home. If you wish to leave after, I will not stop you. But I will protect you. Always. She looked at him, truly looked, and something deep inside her shifted. He was not just kind. He was strong, sure, and something about the way he looked at her made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Grace nodded. Yes, she whispered. Take me with you. He stood and reached for her hand. When she took it, he held it tightly, his grip warm and solid. And for the first time since the canyon had opened its jaws around her, she felt like maybe she had not been abandoned after all. Maybe she had been found. The wind changed as they crossed into the higher country, carrying the scent of pine and damp stone. Grace walked beside Etu, her steps steadier now, though the muscles in her legs burned by midday. The path twisted through steep ridges and narrow switchbacks, and Ada moved with quiet certainty, glancing back at her only when the climb grew sharp. He carried most of the weight, blankets, food, the waterskin without complaint. When they paused to rest beneath a slope of granite where wildflowers grew between the cracks, Grace took off her boots and flexed her blistered toes. Ada squatted nearby, sharpening a blade against a stone, the rasp of metal steady and light. That knife, she said. It's yours from before? He nodded without looking up. My father gave it to me the day I killed my first deer. I was 14 winters. She watched the edge reflect sunlight. Did he teach you to track? He did, Ada said. He tested the blade with his thumb. But my mother taught me how to wait. Grace tilted her head. Wait for what? For things that take longer than a hunt, he said. Storms. Dreams. People. She ran her fingers through the dust beside her. I've never been good at waiting. You had no choice when I found you, he said, meeting her eyes. No, she said quietly. I didn't. They didn't speak again until the shadows began to stretch. That night, they camped beneath a sheer bluff where the stone held the sun's warmth long after dark. Ada built the fire with care, arranging the wood so the smoke curled upward in a thin, clean line. Grace sat close, wrapping her arms around her knees, watching the coals settle. After a long silence, she said, I wasn't raised to think kindly of your people. Ada did not flinch. He stirred the fire with a stick. Nor mine of yours. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then don't believe words, he said. Watch how people act when no one is looking. She considered that. You came for me with no promise of anything. I came because I was meant to. I stay because I choose to. She reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist where the firelight caught the curve of a scar. Will I be accepted where you're taking me? Ada looked at her hand before lifting his gaze. Some will question. Some will not speak. But my place is strong. And when I say you are welcome, it will be so. The fire popped. Grace pulled her blanket tighter. What if I don't belong anywhere anymore? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then we make a place. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. They rose early the next morning before the sky had fully turned. The trail leveled out as they passed through a grove of cottonwoods where the trunks stood pale and smooth, the leaves whispering low over their heads. A stream ran alongside the path, and Ada stopped to refill the waterskin. Grace knelt beside him, hands in the cool water. You said your people live beyond the mountain, she said. How far? We'll reach them by dusk. She nodded, drying her palms on her skirt. Are you a leader among them? I am the son of one, he said. The elders listen, but I do not lead. Would you want to? Ada stood and looked toward the ridgeline. Only if I could do it without silence. Some speak with power but say nothing. Grace rose beside him. You don't speak much either. I speak when it matters, he said. And you listen. They walked again, the ground rising beneath their feet. In the late afternoon, they crested a hill where the trees opened to reveal a wide spread of land cradled between ridges. Smoke curled from several lodges, and people moved among them gathering wood, tending fires, speaking in low voices. Ada stopped and looked down at the settlement. This is my home. Grace's breath caught. It's beautiful. He turned to her, eyes steady. You don't need to be afraid. I'm not afraid, she said. Just not sure what to do next. Step forward, he said. That's all. He led her down the slope, not taking her hand but not leaving her side either. As they reached the edge of the trees, a young woman carrying a bundle of herbs caught sight of them and called out in Apache. Ada answered, his voice calm. More heads turned. An elder stepped from one of the lodges, his eyes narrow, sharp like Etu's, but his hair streaked with gray. They spoke in words Grace couldn't follow, but no one raised a voice or stepped forward. She stood beside Etu, silent, her hands clenched in her skirt. When the elder looked at her, Ada said something else short, certain. The man studied her, then gave a single nod. Ada turned to her. Come. You will stay in my lodge. Is that allowed? It is now. She followed him past the fire circles and quiet stairs, breathing in the scent of sage and earth. Inside the lodge, the air was warm, the walls lined with woven mats and carved wood. Ada set down his gear and watched her take in the space. Grace stepped forward, touching the edge of a hanging basket. This feels like it was waiting. He knelt by the fire pit, placing kindling with care. It was. She crouched across from him, her gaze steady. You meant what you said. About choosing to stay. I do not say what I do not mean. Her voice softened. Then I'm choosing too. Ada looked at her, the firelight catching in his eyes. And what do you choose? She reached forward, her palm resting atop his hand. To belong, she said. Here. With you. Grace stood outside Etu's lodge as the morning mist curled low across the earth. A faint wind stirred the smoke rising from nearby fires, and the smell of roasted corn drifted through the village from a hearth across the way. She kept her hands clasped before her, unsure if she should walk farther or wait. Children darted between lodges, their feet bare and fast. No one spoke to her, but no one turned her away either. Etu emerged from behind the lodge carrying a basket of folded hides. His hair was still damp from the river, and the line of his jaw held the quiet focus she had come to recognize. You're up early, he said. I didn't sleep much. He set the basket down and picked up a clay bowl resting on a low bench. Come, he said. You'll help me grind the corn. She followed him to the shade of a tall cedar where a flat stone sat nestled in the grass. He knelt beside it and poured the kernels into a shallow groove. Grace lowered herself opposite him, watching as he took the heavy pestle and began to crush them with slow, even pressure. You do this every morning? Most days. My mother taught me when I was small. She reached for the pestle when he paused, her fingers brushing his. He let her try. The rhythm was harder to keep than it looked, but she kept at it until the corn softened into meal. I want to be useful, she said. You are, he answered. I mean more than just being here. I want to earn my place. He looked at the meal under her hands. Then learn all things as if they matter. Because they do. She nodded and kept grinding. Later, as the sun rose higher, Etu led her past the edge of the village to where the earth opened into terraced gardens. Rows of squash and beans stretched toward the trees, and a woman in a red dress knelt among them, pulling weeds with swift, practiced motion. She looked up when they approached. This is my aunt, Ada said. Her name is Nantanlina. Grace offered a small bow of her head. I'm Grace Halloway. Nantanlina studied her for a long breath. Then she gestured at the ground beside her. If you have hands, use them. Grace knelt and began pulling weeds, careful not to disturb the roots. They worked in silence at first. The soil was warm and soft under her fingernails. You were not raised here, Nantanlina said at last. No, then you must unlearn some things. Grace looked up. Like what? Like thinking you were alone when you were not. Grace said nothing, but her hands moved with more certainty. When they returned to the village, Ada paused outside a small structure built from stacked stone and timber, its roof thatched with grass. This was my grandfather's work lodge, he said. It's empty now. She stepped inside. Dust lay thick along the beams, but the space was solid, warm. A low table sat against the far wall, its surface worn smooth by years of use. She ran her hand across it. It could be made into something again. It's yours if you want it. She turned slowly. To do what with? Whatever brings you peace. That night, after the fires had dimmed and the village settled into quiet, Grace sat beside Ada beneath the cedar tree. The stars were sharp and close overhead. Do you miss anything from before? She asked. He leaned back against the trunk, arms crossed loosely. Not things, but some moments. My sister's laugh. My father's voice before sleep. Grace drew her knees up. I used to sit by the river behind our house in Missouri and watch the current until it blurred. I'd pretend it could carry me somewhere else. Did it? Not in the way I thought. But I guess it brought me here. Etu reached for her hand, his fingers finding hers in the dark. The water always knows its path, even when we don't. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm afraid of being seen as a burden. You are seen as someone who walks through fire and keeps walking. She turned her face toward him. You see me that way? I see you as you are. He didn't let go of her hand. When she finally leaned her head against his shoulder, he didn't move. His breath was steady. The night held no sound but the wind through the grass, and for the first time in her memory she did not want to be anywhere else. The days took on quiet shape. Grace rose with the light, her body learning the rhythm of this new life through repetition and motion. She fetched water with Nantanlina before the sun crested the trees, her fingers pink from the cold in the stream. She learned to strip bark from willow limbs and twist them into cord. She listened more than she spoke, noting which roots the women gathered and which they left untouched. Etu worked with the hunters in the hills to the north, his absence never long. Each evening he returned with the scent of cedar smoke on his skin and a stillness that steadied her. One morning, Grace sat stitching a pouch from deer hide when Etu entered the work lodge, his steps quiet across the packed dirt. You're learning quickly, he said, crouching beside her. I still so crooked, she replied, holding up the lopsided flap. He took the pouch and turned it in his hands. It holds. That's what matters. She leaned back against the wall, letting her eyes rest on his profile. I've been wondering something. He looked up, waiting. When you said you dreamed of me, was it just a vision of my face? Or did you see more? I saw you in winter, he said, carrying a child wrapped in a red blanket. I saw you standing beside me while smoke rose from our fire. She swallowed. That's not just a dream. No, he said. It's a path. She traced the seam of her pouch. I don't know how to be a mother. No one does until they are. She looked down. I'm still angry sometimes. That he left. That I let him take so much of me. You did not let him. He only took what he could carry. He could not carry you. She met his eyes. You make it sound simple. It is not, he said. But truth often feels that way when spoken plain. She folded the pouch and set it aside. Do your people believe things happen for a reason? We believe the ancestors leave signs. But it is the living who must choose what to do with them. She nodded slowly. Then I choose to stay. He didn't move, but she saw the breath shift in his chest. I had a name I was given at birth, she said. But I don't know if it fits anymore. He tilted his head. What would you be called now? I don't know yet, she said. But I'd like to earn one here. A name that means something. Etu stood and reached for her hand. Then come. They walked beyond the fields to the high ridge where juniper trees clung to the rocks. From there, the land spread wide, soft with sage and broken only by the line of the distant canyon. A hawk circled above, its cry sharp against the silence. Etu pointed to a flat stone embedded in the ridge. Sit, he said. She did. He knelt and gathered a handful of dry earth, letting it sift through his fingers. This is where I came after my father died, he said. I was 16. I stayed here through one full night. I asked the spirits what I would become. And did they answer? He nodded. In wind. In silence. In the way I felt when I stood and knew I could walk back without fear. She looked out across the land. Do you think they'll speak to me? They already have, he said. You heard them when you chose to live. She closed her eyes and let the wind move across her skin. It smelled of stone and something green. That night, she sat beside Etu's fire, their backs to the village. The stars came slowly, one by one, until the sky was full. He held a bowl of water in his lap, the surface still. Do you see yourself? He asked, holding it toward her. She leaned over and looked. Her face was unfamiliar, thinner, stronger, sun-darkened. But her eyes held something steady. I see someone who survived, she whispered. He dipped his fingers in the water and let drops fall onto the earth. Let the old name fall away, he said. You are no longer who you were. She looked at him, the firelight painting his face in gold and shadow. And who am I now? He reached into the pouch at his waist and withdrew a strip of leather threaded with a single carved bead. Yasni, he said. It means clear sky after storm. She took the strip in her hands. It's beautiful. It is yours. She tied it around her wrist and felt something settle deep inside her. Not an ending. A beginning solid, earned, and hers. The snow came early that year. By mid-November, the pass leading down from the ridge was already blanketed, the trails narrowed to a hush of white beneath the pines. Grace stepped out of the work lodge, drawing her shawl tighter, breath rising in front of her like smoke. The cold had settled into her bones, but it no longer felt foreign, just another rhythm to learn. Ada stood near the corral, tying a thick wrap around a young horse's legs. He glanced over as she approached, his hands steady even with the rope stiff from frost. This one's too young for the high trail, he said. Won't hold his footing if the ice thickens. She rested her hand on the fence rail. Then he stays. Ada's eyes warmed. He'll learn by spring. She watched the colt nudge his arm, looking for grain. You're gentle with him. I was taught not to rush breath into the world, he said. Animals know when you're trying to lead faster than they can go. Grace traced the grain of the wood beneath her palm. I think I made peace with the past last night. Ada looked up at her, waiting. I dreamed I stood in that canyon again, she said. But this time I wasn't afraid. The sun came up and I just watched it rise. Nothing chased me. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her elbow. What did you feel? Still, she said. Like I'd stopped needing to run. His hand remained at her arm, warm and firm. She turned to him. I never thanked you. Not really. You lived. That is thanks enough. I did more than live, she said. You gave me a place to become. He held her eyes. No one gives that. You built it. She reached for his wrist, fingers curling around the soft leather he wore. I want to stay beside you. Not just through winter. He didn't speak for a moment, but the quiet held no uncertainty. I've known that since the river thawed, he said. But I waited until you could say it for yourself. Later that day, Ada brought her to his mother's lodge, where the fire burned low and the air smelled of dried herbs and cedar. His mother, Taklisha, sat on a woven mat, her silver-streaked braid falling over her shoulder. She gestured for Grace to sit. I've watched you, she said, voice low and measured. The way you walk through this place, the way you listen. You do not ask to belong. You act as one who already does. Grace folded her hands in her lap. I didn't come looking to be accepted. I only came because I had nowhere else. Taklisha nodded slowly. That is how many begin. But few stay when the seasons turn. Grace met her gaze. I'm not leaving. Then you must come before the council fire tonight, Taklisha said. Not to prove yourself, but to be named among us. That evening, as dusk settled behind the trees and the fire was lit high in the village circle, Grace stood beside Etu. The elders sat in a wide arc, their faces carved with years and wind. Nantanlina placed a woven shawl over Grace's shoulders, the pattern stitched with a dark red thread. A small boy handed her a single braid of sweetgrass. She held it with both hands and stepped forward. She spoke only once. My name was Grace, she said. But I am not only what I was called. I came here with nothing. And now I offer all I have. The fire crackled. No one moved for a long beat. Then Taklisha spoke. You have walked through the storm and into the light. Let that be your name among us. And so it was. That winter, they shared a small lodge near the base of the ridge where the wind whistled but did not bite. Grace wove blankets from rabbit fur and helped dry meat over the fire. Ada carved toys for the younger children, small birds and deer from softwood. At night, they lay close beneath thick hides, their breath warm against each other's skin. One morning, as pale light broke against the canvas walls, Grace reached for Ada's hand beneath the covers. The child moves more now, she said. He shifted closer, palm resting against her stomach. He'll be strong. Grace said, smiling faintly. I think she will be quieter than me. She will listen like her mother, he said. And speak when the earth is ready to hear her. In early spring, when the snow melted from the ridge and the first green shoots rose from the thawed soil, Grace gave birth to a daughter under a sky clear as glass. Ada sat beside her, his hand never leaving hers. The child came into the world with little sound, her eyes wide and calm. They named her Casa after a word that meant dawn's promise. The women of the village brought gifts, a carved cradleboard, braided necklaces, and herbs for Grace's healing. Taklisha laid a hand on her shoulder and did not speak, but her eyes held something fierce and proud. That summer, Grace took her daughter to the same stone ridge where Ada had knelt years before. She stood with Casa wrapped to her chest, watching the wind move through the valley below. Ada joined her, his hand brushing the back of her neck. "You brought her here to see?" "I brought her here to remember," Grace said. "Even though she won't yet." They stood in silence, the three of them, beneath the wide blue sky. Years passed. Grace taught other women how to twist cord, how to dye cloth with crushed berries. She planted herbs outside the lodge and taught her daughter to read the sky before the rains. Etu never left the land, though he was often called to travel with hunters or speak for the elders. Each time he returned, he brought her something: a feather, a stone, a story. And every night they returned to the same fire. Side by side, without fear, without distance. Grace never spoke again of the canyon. She didn't need to. She had crossed it. And what waited on the other side was not survival. It was love, hard-earned and whole. They lived many years beyond that first winter, and each season deepened what had begun not in words, but in the silence between them. Through storm and drought, through laughter and age, they remained as they had chosen together. Always together.